It began on an ordinary morning, in a hallway where cruelty sounded like laughter. A fragile boy stood cornered, his back against cold metal, while the world watched and said nothing. Then one voice, calm and steady, broke the silence. A new girl stepped forward, her eyes clear as glass, her courage unshaken. In a single heartbeat, everything changed. What followed was not just a fight, but the beginning of a story about pain, redemption, and the quiet power of standing tall when no one else dares to. The sound of metal echoed down the corridor. A locker slammed shut, followed by the dull thud of a body hitting steel. Ethan Cole slid to the floor, clutching his backpack like a shield. His glasses hung crooked on his face. Laughter rippled through the hallway, sharp, bright, cruel. Jared Ross stood over him, tall and composed, the kind of boy whose father's badge had already carved a space of authority around him. His smile carried no joy, only the practiced grin of someone who knew the rules would always bend his way. Come on, Cole, Jared said, pressing a finger to Ethan's forehead. You're blocking my locker. Or is this your natural position? The crowd chuckled. Someone lifted a phone, ready to record, then a voice steady and low cut through the noise. Let him breathe. All eyes turned out. A girl stood at the end of the corridor, hands in the pockets of her worn denim jacket. Her hair was tied back loosely, the morning light catching strands of chestnut that framed a face neither nervous nor angry, just calm in a way that made everyone else uneasy. Jared's smirk deepened. You must be the new girl. Want to make an entrance? Hannah Reed did not answer. She walked forward, slow and deliberate, until her shadow stretched over Ethan's shoes. Walk away, she said. Jared laughed. Or what? The phone camera zoomed in. The crowd leaned forward. Hannah's fist moved before the sentence was finished. The sound flesh against jaw, a heavy drop of silence erased every trace of laughter. Jared stumbled back, his phone clattering to the tiles. For a heartbeat, the hallway froze. Voiceover, people remember the punch. They never ask what it cost. That morning had begun like any other in Redwood Bay, mist clinging to the rooftops, the ocean humming somewhere beyond the pine trees. Grace Morgan sipped her coffee while her son adjusted his tie for the third time. Ethan, you look fine, she said gently. He nodded but did not meet her eyes. The faint bruise near his temple had almost faded, a quiet reminder of the last school he had left behind. Grace reached across the counter, resting her hand on his. This is a new start. Redwood Bay High isn't like the others. He gave a small smile that did not reach his eyes. That's what everyone says about new places. Outside, the town stirred awake. The local radio played through the open window, the host's cheerful voice announcing Community Pride Day, celebrating the safest town on the coast. Grace turned off the radio. She had lived in enough small towns to know what those words really meant. Safety was just another word for silence. At school, the corridors smelled of waxed floors and disinfectant. The kind of clean that hides what people choose not to see. In homeroom, Principal Turner introduced a new transfer student. This is Hannah Reed, he announced. Please make her feel welcome. A few polite nods followed, nothing more. Hannah took the empty seat near the back. She noticed Jared Ross leaning against the wall, spinning his pen like he owned the room. He did, in a way his father's influence reached into every corner of the school board. Principal Turner's voice carried an undertone of weariness when he said, let's hope for a smooth year, everyone. No repeats of last spring. The class went quiet. Jared looked down, his jaw tightening. Hannah caught the flicker of shame in his expression, a momentary shadow before arrogance covered it again. She recognized that look. It belonged to someone who had learned power from fear. By lunch, Ethan was already on the radar of the wrong people. His quiet nature, his careful steps, it was enough. Jared's friends found him near the lockers, their laughter bouncing off the walls, still hiding behind books. Cole? One sneered. Jared raised his phone. Smile for the camera. Let's show everyone our school's finest. The phone lens gleamed like an unblinking eye. Ethan froze before Jared could press record. A hand reached out. Hannah snatched the phone, turned it in her palm, and let it drop. The screen shattered against the floor. The hallway gasped. Jared stared at the broken glass, his breath quickening. You just made a mistake. Hannah met his eyes. So did you. He lunged. She sidestepped, planted her foot, and struck. The movement was clean, controlled, almost graceful. Jared hit the ground hard. The crowd backed away. For the first time, silence felt heavier than noise. A door slammed open at the end of the corridor. Principal Turner's voice cut through the stillness. Enough. My office. Now. Hannah exhaled slowly, her knuckles red, her heartbeat steady. She looked down at Jared, his pride bruised far deeper than his jaw, and then turned to Ethan, who sat frozen against the locker. Get up, she said softly. He did. As Turner led them toward his office, the whispers began, half fear, half awe. Hannah paused, brushing a smear of blood from her hand. That's the last time he laughs at someone smaller, she murmured. The hallway lights flickered once, and the screen faded to black. The door to Principal Turner's office shut with a careful click. The sound was not loud. It was deliberate. Contained. The way a man closes a door when he is already calculating what might leak through it. Hannah sat in the first chair. Ethan sat in the second. Jared sat in the third, one hand pressed against his jaw, his eyes hot with humiliation. A thin line of red traced the edge of his lower lip. He stared at Hannah as if staring could bruise. Principal Turner did not sit right away. He stood behind his desk and pressed his fingertips into the wood, as if steadying himself against a storm he did not name. "Let us begin," he said. His tone was even, professional. Tired that he looked at Jared first. "What happened in that hallway?" Jared did not answer immediately. He was waiting, the way a child waits for a parent to walk into the room and decide the weather. Then he lifted his shoulders and said, "She attacked me without warning. I was trying to talk to him. She went crazy." The word hung in the air. Hannah did not turn toward him. She kept her gaze forward, jaw set, hands quiet in her lap. The skin around her knuckles was already starting to swell. It was Ethan who spoke. His voice trembled, but it did not break. "He pushed me into the locker," Ethan said. "He grabbed my shirt and would not let me move." His friend was trying to record it. "He was not talking to me. He was humiliating me." Principal Turner's eyes moved to Hannah. "And you chose to intervene with physical force?" "Yes," Hannah said. "We do not solve violence with violence," Turner replied. For the first time, Hannah lifted her face to meet his. Her eyes were steady. Her words were soft, but each syllable was sharp and exact. "We also do not solve suffocation by asking the victim to be patient," she said. The room held its breath. Turner's jaw tightened. For a moment, something almost passed through his expression. Respect. Recognition. Memory. It vanished as quickly as it appeared. He sat. He opened a drawer and pulled out a white disciplinary form. "Miss Reed," he said quietly. Formal now, as if distance might protect him. "You are suspended from class activity until I review this incident with the district. You will complete your coursework in supervised detention. You will not be in the general hallways during break." He did not look at her when he said it. He signed the paper. His pen scraped across the line with the clean finality of a small verdict. Hannah did not move. "And him?" she asked. Turner glanced at Jared. His throat worked. "Jared will receive a written warning for inappropriate conduct," he said. "I will speak with him and his father privately." Jared leaned back, smug in the chair. Ethan's mouth opened, then closed again. Hannah let out a breath. A quiet breath. The kind you take not to calm yourself, but to keep from saying what will set fire to the room. When Turner dismissed them, Jared rose first. He leaned down so only she could hear him and whispered, very softly, "This is my town." Hannah did not flinch. She did not answer. She simply watched the door after he left. Only when they were gone did Turner speak again, his voice lower, almost weary. "That is enough for today," he told her. "We are done." "No," she said. "You are done." "I am not." He looked up then. Her eyes had no anger in them. That would have been easier to handle. Instead, she looked at him with something colder. Something like disappointment. Turner swallowed. "This is a school," he told himself. "This is not a courtroom. This is not a battleground." He did not say out loud the truth that sat like a stone in his stomach. "This is also a town where the sheriff's son does not lose." Grace Morgan arrived at the school just after noon. The secretary at the front desk tried to give her a practiced smile. Grace did not return it. She had the expression of a woman who had worked too long to make her son feel safe, and was tired of being polite about it. "Is Principal Turner available?" she asked. 1 minute later, she was in his office. Turner lifted his eyes from the paperwork when she entered. He looked, in that moment, older than he had in front of the students. His shoulders curved not with anger, but with weight. "Mrs. Morgan," he began, "I was going to call you." "Yes," Grace said. Her voice was calm. "I believe that. I would like to hear it in person." He sighed. "Your son was involved in an altercation." "My son," Grace said, "was pushed into a locker and filmed as entertainment." Turner closed his eyes for the briefest instant. "The situation is complicated," he said. "Redwood Bay is a small community. We depend on cooperation to function." Grace leaned forward. "Cooperation," she repeated. "Is that what you call it when the boy who assaults someone walks out with a warning and the girl who stops him is punished?" "It is not that simple," Turner whispered. "The town needs quiet." "Quiet," Grace said softly, "does not mean peace." There was no anger in her voice. That made it strike deeper. He looked up at her. For years, Principal Turner had kept balance. He had smoothed, calmed, contained. He had convinced himself that he was preventing escalation. Today, for the first time in a long time, he felt like a man hiding behind order while a child bled in his hallway. "I am not your enemy, Mrs. Morgan," he said quietly. "Then prove it," she replied. Detention did not look like a jail cell. It looked like a library after hours. The sun had already shifted in the sky. The windows along the west wall had gone pale gold, throwing long stripes of light across the carpet. The clock ticked, too loud in the quiet. Hannah pushed a cleaning cart between the tables. Ethan walked beside her, holding a stack of returned books in both arms. For a long time, neither spoke. He set a book down too quickly. It slipped, dropped, and hit the floor with a soft thud. "Sorry," Ethan whispered. Hannah crouched to pick it up. She handed it back to him, handle first. "You do not have to apologize for gravity," she said. He let out a thin breath that could have been a laugh. After a moment, he said, "He does this everywhere. Every school. He finds someone and he does not let go." Hannah nodded once. "I saw." Ethan looked at her. "Why did you help me?" Her hands paused on the cart. For a heartbeat, she did not answer. The air in the library felt still. In that stillness, her guard slipped, just enough for the truth to show through. "Because no one helped me," she said. Her voice was calm. But it was the kind of calm that comes after a storm has already leveled the house. Ethan swallowed. "At your old school?" "At my old home," she said. That was the first fracture in her composure. She did not describe it in detail. She did not need to. The way she placed the word home down like a piece of broken glass was enough. "I learned that when someone bigger than you decides you are theirs to play with," she said, "the room will go quiet. People will tell themselves it is not their place. They will say, do not get involved. Do not escalate." Her eyes lifted to his. "They will call it respect. It is not respect. It is surrender." Ethan stared at her hands. Across the skin of her knuckles were faint pale lines. Scars, thin as threads. He swallowed. His throat ached. "I was going to let him do it," he whispered. "I was going to just let him do it. I thought if I stayed small enough, if I stayed quiet enough, maybe he would get bored. That is what I always do. I go small. I disappear." Hannah watched him. Her expression softened. "Then today happened," he said. "And I watched you. You did not disappear." She did not smile. She only shook her head once. "I fight," she said, "so others do not feel what I felt." The sentence entered the room like the sound of a church bell. Low. Heavy. Final. Ethan could not answer. His eyes had gone wet. He turned away under the pretense of wiping dust from a table. In the doorway, unseen by either of them, Grace stood watching. What she saw in Hannah was not a reckless girl who could not control herself. She saw a wound that had learned to stand upright and walk on its own. Grace felt something tighten in her chest. It was not fear. It was recognition. She had been this girl. Once, that evening, long after the building had emptied. The school hallways were dark except for the quiet glow of the security monitors in Principal Turner's office. He sat alone. Jacket off, tie loosened, fatigue sinking into his bones. On the screen. He watched the footage from the hallway one more time. He watched Jared shove Ethan. He watched Jared raise his phone, smiling. He watched the moment Hannah stepped forward without hesitation. He watched his own face enter the frame at the end. Controlled and stern, as if control were the same thing as justice. He let the video play again. In the silence of his office. The only sound was the soft ticking of the wall clock and his own unsteady breath. At last. He reached forward and clicked save on the official incident file. Then, with his other hand, he hovered over the clip of Jared. Recorded minutes later, lifting a chair and slamming it against the table in rage. Cursing Hannah's name, spitting on the floor. Turner stared at the screen. He knew what that clip meant. He knew what it would become if it left this office. A complaint. A report. A war. He dragged the cursor. He selected delete. The screen went black. He leaned back in his chair. He closed his eyes. "One day," he whispered into the empty room, "I will have to choose." The monitor's dark glass reflected him like a confession. Rumors spread through Redwood Bay the way fog spreads through its mornings quietly, but everywhere. By Monday, Hannah Reid's name was no longer whispered. It was shouted across cafeteria tables, murmured in staff meetings, woven into gossip at grocery lines. Someone had found an old video from her previous school. The clip showed her in a dark hallway, swinging a chair, shouting at a man twice her size. The caption read, "Violent girl attacks her stepfather. Psychopath on the run." No one mentioned the word self-defense. No one asked who the man was. Principal Turner watched the clip on his office computer. The video froze on Hannah's face mid-motion, mouth open in what could have been fury or fear. It no longer mattered. The internet had decided. His phone buzzed before he could close the window. Sheriff Ross. Jared's father. "Keep things clean, Turner," the sheriff said through the static. "We cannot have another scandal. My boy's already dealing with too much after that stunt in the hallway. People expect the school to protect its own." Turner swallowed. "Protect who, exactly?" The line went dead. He leaned back, the hum of the computer filling the silence. His eyes returned to the frozen frame on the screen. Hannah's face caught between anger and desperation. He pressed the power button and let the monitor go black. That evening, as the sky burned into a deep orange over the parking lot, Hannah walked out of detention alone. The air smelled of rain waiting to happen. She heard laughter behind her. Familiar laughter. Jared stepped out from behind a pickup truck, his friends flanking him like shadows. His jaw had healed, but the bruise of humiliation had not. Well, if it is not the charity case, he said. How does it feel to be famous again?
Hannah kept walking. He followed. You know what people are saying? That you do not belong here. That you are dangerous. They are right. Girls like you never change. You just find new towns to break. She stopped. The wind lifted her hair from her face. Go home, Jared. He stepped closer. You think you are tough because you threw one punch? Because you got Turner wrapped around your finger? Hannah's voice stayed calm. Turner does not protect me. He protects his fear. Jared's eyes narrowed. You should learn when to shut your mouth. He grabbed her arm. She moved instantly, training, instinct, and something older than both. She twisted free and shoved him back. His heel hit the curb. He stumbled, then roared and lunged. They hit the pavement hard. The rain broke open above them. Across the parking lot, Ethan saw the struggle. He had stayed late to finish a project, hoping to avoid notice. But the sight of Jared's hands around Hannah's shoulders ripped through the shell of hesitation that had always held him still. He ran. Stop! His voice cracked as it cut through the storm. Leave her alone! Jared turned, wild with rage. Stay out of this! But Ethan did not stop. He threw himself forward. Jared's fist met his cheek before he reached them. The impact sent him sprawling into a puddle, the cold water splashing up his arms. Hannah shouted his name, but Jared's voice drowned her out. You think you are her hero. You are nothing. He raised his hand again, and headlights flooded the parking lot, the screech of tires. The slam of a car door. Grace Morgan's voice sliced through the rain. Enough! Her coat clung to her shoulders as she strode forward, her face pale in the glare of the headlights. Behind her, another car pulled in. Principal Turner stepped out, rain soaking through his shirt, his expression torn between fear and resolve. Jared froze under their gaze. The sheriff's authority no longer shielded him here. Not tonight. Turner's voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of every year he had stayed silent. No more excuses, Jared, no more warnings. You are suspended, and your father will hear it from me, not the other way around. Jared opened his mouth, then closed it. The sound of the rain swallowed him. He turned, muttering something no one could hear, and disappeared into the darkness. Grace knelt beside Ethan. His face was bleeding. He tried to sit up. Mom, I tried. She held his shoulders gently. You did enough. Hannah was still standing, trembling now that the danger had passed. The adrenaline that had carried her through was fading, leaving only the weight of what almost happened. Turner looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not a delinquent, but a child exhausted from surviving. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and rain-soaked clothes. Ethan sat on the bed, a small bandage on his cheek, the colour drained from his face. Hannah sat beside him, her hand wrapped in gauze. Grace stood at the window, watching water slide down the glass in thin silver lines. For a long time, no one spoke. Then Ethan whispered, I watched them hit you, and I froze. I hate that part of me. His voice broke. The tears came without permission, sudden and raw. I hate that I'm always afraid. Hannah turned toward him. Her face was pale, her lips cracked from the cold, but her eyes held warmth. Freezing is not weakness, she said. It is what pain teaches us. But you stood up tonight. He shook his head. I failed, she smiled faintly. Then fail again. But do it standing. Grace turned from the window. Her own voice was quiet, heavy with memory. You sound like someone who has been through a war. Hannah met her eyes. I have. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of what she did not say. The man with the belt, the nights behind locked doors, the neighbours who heard and did nothing. Her voice was soft when she finally spoke again. I was expelled because I hit my stepfather. He had my sister cornered. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find and swung. The police called it assault. I called it survival. Grace crossed the room and took Hannah's hand in both of hers. You did not ruin your life, she said. You protected it. Hannah's eyes filled with tears she did not let fall. Days later, the rain cleared. The air smelled of pine and salt again. In the auditorium, Principal Turner stood before the morning assembly. His voice carried through the quiet hall. Last week, this school failed to protect one of its own. We looked away when we should have stood up. For that, I am deeply sorry. Students shifted in their seats. Jared's chair was empty. Turner turned to where Hannah stood at the edge of the stage. "Miss Reed, you have shown more courage than many of us who wear titles. I hope one day this place deserves your forgiveness." Hannah nodded once, her expression calm. "Thank you, sir. But forgiveness is not what I came here for." That afternoon she packed a small bag. Grace and Ethan stood by as the bus pulled up. "You are leaving?" Ethan asked, his voice breaking. "Sometimes," she said. "To grow, you have to leave the ground that hurt you." The driver honked once. Hannah stepped onto the bus. As it pulled away, Ethan ran a few steps alongside, rainwater splashing under his shoes. "I am not weak anymore," he shouted. Hannah looked back through the glass, her hand lifting in silent reply. The bus turned the corner and vanished into the mist. The screen faded to black. The boy was on the ground. He tried not to cry, but his face had already turned red from the effort of holding everything in. One knee touched the pavement. One hand shielded his face. Two taller boys stood over him, not quite touching him now, but close enough to let him feel what would happen if he moved. "Stay down," one of them said. "Nobody is coming." That sentence had power. It always did. Then another voice cut through the late afternoon air. "Enough." It was not a shout. It did not need to be. Both boys turned. A young man was walking across the blacktop. His stride was even. His chin was lifted. There was a small scar near his cheek, pale against the skin. His eyes were steady, not angry, not frantic. "Simply sure, step back," he said. The taller boys hesitated. One of them tried bravado. "We were just talking." The young man shook his head. "No, you were practicing ownership. There is a difference." The two boys muttered something under their breath and retreated, trying to look like they had chosen to leave. The little boy on the ground finally breathed. The young man knelt. "Stand up," he said. The child's lips trembled. "They will just do it again." "Not if you stop apologizing for breathing," the young man replied. "Lift your chin." Slowly, shakily, the boy rose. His shoulders curled in on themselves, the way a cold body curls for warmth. "Not like that," the young man said. He moved behind him and placed two hands, gentle and firm, on the boy's shoulders. He guided them back just a little. He lifted his head with one finger under the chin. Spine tall, eyes forward. You were allowed to take up space. The child tried. The pose looked borrowed at first, but then it began to settle into him, like a coat that almost fit. The young man nodded. "Good, my name is Ethan." The boy swallowed. "Jacob." Ethan gave him a steady look. "Jacob, listen to me. 3 years ago I could not stand up either. Now I teach other people how." For a moment Jacob said nothing. Then his mouth moved into something close to a smile. "Can I stay for the class?" he asked. "Yes," Ethan said. "You can stay for the class." From the edge of the blacktop, where the cracked paint of the basketball lines curved like tide marks, a woman watched them. Grace Morgan stood with her hands folded loosely, a jacket draped over her arm. The light was soft around her, late sun warming the edges of her face. She watched her son and felt for a long, still moment, the kind of quiet that is not the absence of trouble, but the presence of steadiness. She remembered a different parking lot, rain, headlights, blood on her son's cheek. Hannah swaying but unbroken, panic running under Grace's skin like a live current. Tonight, the air smelled of cut grass and chalk. No sirens, no shouting, just the sound of children learning to plant their feet in the world. Grace closed her eyes. "Thank you," she thought. The gym doors stood open behind her. Inside, the floor had been taped off into 3 training stations. A length of rope hung from a support beam for grip work. Soft mats lay in the corner for falls and rolls. None of it looked like a place built for violence. It looked like a place built for survival. She watched Ethan move through the space. He did not bark orders. He did not perform. He showed, he explained. He repeated. When one of the smaller girls flinched each time a hand moved toward her, he slowed the entire exercise and let her set the pace. He told her in a calm voice, "You choose when contact happens. If someone ignores that, they are wrong. Not you." Grace felt something in her chest tighten and warm. He was not teaching them to hurt. He was teaching them to keep themselves. Near the far wall, a length of rope dangled near a beam. Grace's mind offered an image she had never been able to erase. Hannah's knuckles split open under cold rain. Hannah standing in front of Ethan like a shield. Hannah shaking but refusing to step back. Her eyes lifted to the doorway, and then, as if memory had answered her instead of time, Hannah Reed stepped into the gym. For a moment, she did not move. She stood in the doorframe, lit from behind by the low sun. Her hair was pulled back. She wore a plain canvas jacket and carried a notebook pressed against her chest. Grace felt her breath catch. Hannah looked older, but not older in the way that sorrow ages a person. Older in the way that purpose does. There was a stillness in her now. The frantic edge that lived in her shoulders was gone. Her eyes were clear. Ethan saw her. The world did not stop. The gym light still hummed. Jacob still practiced his stance, shoulders trembling with effort. But something inside Ethan went utterly still, like a lake without wind. For a long moment, he did not walk to her. He only looked. Then he crossed the floor. They stood facing one another, close enough to touch, not yet touching. Hannah smiled first. It was not the sharp defensive smile she used to wear. It was small and true. "It looks like you learned how to fight," she said. Ethan let out a slow breath. "The kind a person has been holding for years. You taught me to stand," he said. The words were simple. They did not need music under them. They did not need explanation. They settled in the air between them like a promise that had finally found the right voice. For an instant, her eyes shone. She nodded once. "I am here on internship," Hannah said. "Psychology and youth advocacy. I asked to be placed in Redwood Bay. The program director thought it was sentimental." She paused, then added with quiet certainty, "I told him it was unfinished work." Something in Ethan's face flickered, then steadied. "It is good work," he said. Behind them, a slow set of footsteps approached. The shoes were formal, the pace careful. Principal Turner stood in the doorway of the gym. He was holding a thin manila folder. He looked different than he had on that first day in his office. Some of the weight that had bowed him was still there, but it had shifted. It no longer seemed like the weight of fear. It seemed like the weight of choice. "Mrs. Morgan," he said with a respectful nod. "Ethan." He paused, then inclined his head toward Hannah. His voice softened. "Miss Reed." Hannah held his gaze. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. Turner cleared his throat. "I came to deliver something in person." He held out the folder. "As of last night, Redwood Bay Unified has approved a pilot program. We are calling it the Peer Protection Initiative. It funds this class, formalizes reporting, and places responsibility in the open where it belongs." He drew a breath. No more hallway deals. No more looking away. Grace accepted the folder. Her hands were steady. Turner turned to her. "You were right," he said quietly. "Quiet never meant peace." Grace studied his face for a moment. She had once stood in his office and asked him to prove that he was not her enemy. Now she saw in his eyes a man who had chosen a side and understood the price of choosing it. For the first time she nodded with something like approval. "Thank you," she said. He exhaled, and for a moment he looked almost relieved. Almost human again. When he left, the gym felt warmer. Somewhere behind them, Jacob tugged on Ethan's sleeve. "Is it true?" he whispered. "You could not stand up before either?" Ethan knelt so that their eyes were level. "It is true," he said. "But someone stood up for me. So I decided I would learn, and then I would never let anyone smaller than me feel alone again." Jacob swallowed. "Will you teach me too?" Ethan smiled. "I am already teaching you." Grace watched the scene. Her eyes stung, not from pain, but from the strange tenderness of seeing a wound become a doorway. She thought of the night rain poured over a parking lot, and fear tasted like metal. She thought of Hannah's voice in a hospital room, telling her son, "Fail again. But do it standing." Her own voice rose then, quietly, like a story being placed in careful hands. "Strength," she said, "is not the punch you throw. It is the boundary you draw and the line you hold. It is the moment you tell a child, you are allowed to exist as you are, and no one has the right to take that from you." The gym fell into a soft hush. Outside, the sun was lowering. The golden light moved across the polished floor like water. Children laughed. Rope brushed against small palms. Shoes slid and found balance. Voices layered over one another, bright and alive. If you are listening to this, and someone once stood up for you, then you already understand what you are hearing. You carry that moment even now. You carry the hand that lifted you from the ground. You carry the voice that told you, stand, share that memory, because courage does not end in the body of the person who showed it. Courage echoes. It moves forward. It repeats itself in the next hallway, the next parking lot, the next frightened child. Cruelty tries to be loud, but courage lasts longer. Years have passed since that first day in the hallway, but the sound of that single punch still echoes. Not because it was violent, but because it was true. It was the sound of one person deciding that silence would no longer define them. From that echo, an entire chain of courage began. Ethan found his voice. Grace rediscovered her strength. Principal Turner remembered what integrity sounds like. And Hannah became the living proof that survival can turn into salvation when it learns how to breathe again. The lesson that remains is not about fighting. It is about standing in the spaces where fear has lived too long. Standing even when your knees shake, standing for someone who cannot yet stand for themselves. Because every act of quiet defiance ripples outward, further than you will ever see. Look closely at your own life. Somewhere, perhaps long ago, someone stepped between you and a hurt that could have broken you. Maybe they spoke. Maybe they simply stayed beside you. Maybe that small gesture was what made you believe you were worth saving. If so, carry that forward. Be that voice. Be that hand. Be that steadiness for someone else, and if no one ever stood for you, then let this story remind you. You are allowed to begin the chain. You are allowed to draw your own boundary and call it dignity. You are allowed to become the person you once needed, because strength is not loud. It does not shout or demand applause. It is the quiet decision to rise again and again, until kindness becomes instinct, until courage becomes contagious. So when you leave this story, do not leave empty-handed. Take with you the image of a child lifting his chin for the first time, a woman standing her ground beneath a rainstorm, a teacher choosing truth over comfort. Let them remind you that no moment of courage ever truly ends. It only waits to be passed on. If this story touched something inside you, share it. Tell me in the comments where you found your strength or who helped you find it. And if you wish to keep walking with stories like this, stories that breathe truth and quiet bravery into the world, stay with us. Subscribe, join the conversation, and let your voice be part of the echo, because the lesson never ends. It continues with you.